Guys, we are back with another episode of Relational Leadership where we really try to just share some tidbits of our wisdom that can be used really with anybody. It's really about any of our relationships. And again, it can be from the stay at home mom, and I won't come up, with just our kids, all those little toddlers,
Yep.
to teenagers or adult children, um, to CEOs of a company and anything in between, because we all have relationships in our lives and every one of them can use a little help here and there. So, or at certain times. So we try to just give you that little bit. And I'm excited to share today. I'm Stephanie Clements.
And I am Shawn Dawley, and today we are going to be talking about culture. Not the culture of society, but the culture that you have at your workplace, those great cultures you may have experienced in the past, maybe some bad cultures that you've got some toxic memories about. But before we do that, a couple of weeks ago, Stephanie, you sprang something on me without any forewarning, and you asked me some questions to put me on the
Okay.
spot to let people know a little bit more about us. And I'm going to return the favor to
Okay.
you. And I'm going to start by asking you to bare your soul and tell us
Okay.
something you enjoy doing that nobody would ever guess about you.
Okay. Actually, this may go into our topic of today.
That'd be smooth.
Okay. So I have gotten caught up right now into watching and binging Selling Sunset.
Oh no,
It's awful.
Stephanie,
It's
not
awful.
not you. No, I've only seen the previews for that, and I thought, what kind of an idiot? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I've seen the previews. I cannot believe I cannot believe with the precious amount of discretionary time you
I
have
know.
that you would squander it.
I know.
Squander
I'm
it.
staying up
Okay.
way too late at night
Okay. All right.
watching it.
So,
I'm so excited to get to the end. And then I just don't intend to go back after that.
are you hoping that at some point you find out all those people aren't horrible? No. So, all right. So you say you're binging it, which by definition means that you watched the first 5 minutes and said, "I'll finish the episode." You watched the
Yep.
first episode and said, "All right, so what is it?" Okay, other than I got to see how the story comes to a conclusion. Like, why are you being pulled into this?
Well, first off, I was told by several people I should watch it. It is real estate, which is the business that I'm in. Um, and it is, but it is a lot. But you kind of get invested. And then, of course, people are fighting and this or that. And so it ends and you kind of want to see what
Right.
the result is of
Sure.
that.
Okay.
And
All right.
yeah,
So you get invested. You start aligning yourself like with a camp,
yes,
kind of like a
yes,
Team Edward, Team
yes,
Jacob type of
yeah.
affiliation. All right. All right. Fair enough.
So, yeah, so there's my, what I'm doing that I kind of enjoy,
All
and yet
right.
I'm mad.
Well,
I'm mad at myself.
I appreciate the honesty, but I will never look at you the same way again. All right.
I
All
know I've
right.
lost all kinds of respect.
So, moving on, the flip side, perhaps, is what is an irrational phobia? And I say irrational because don't say, well, I'm really afraid of water moccasin and copperhead snakes. Well, you're supposed to be, right? So,
Right.
what is an irrational fear that you think you have?
Mhm. Well, almost any kind of bug,
Okay.
but unfortunately, as a single mom, I've had to fight those, but it has taken a whole lot of talking myself
Okay. All right.
into.
Okay.
So, yeah, those, and even though I know, they're more scared of me than I am of them, and blah,
Sure.
I would really question
Okay. All right. So
whether
you're
that is
not a
actually. I
All
don't
right,
think
so
I
we're not
have any
talking
too
about like
crazy
brown
ones.
recluse or tarantulas because you should be. Those are
Right, right,
legitimate
right.
things to scare you.
Oh, the stink bugs.
I'm not a
Ugh.
fan.
Ugh.
Not scared of them. I'm disgusted by them.
I'm disgusted by them, and I really don't want to touch. I mean, I just ugh.
Well, don't touch them unless you got
Well,
some
no, I've got
Germex
to.
nearby
Yeah,
to scrub down because
yeah.
they're called stink bugs for a reason. All right,
Right.
okay,
Okay, that's about all.
all right. I'll
Yeah.
let you out of the hot seat. Okay, so let's go ahead then and jump right into today's topic about culture, and that word has some I think, buzzword baggage associated with
Sure.
it. You know,
Mhm.
it's kind of trendy right now. On a macro level, there's these caricatures that in the 80s, all corporate culture was nothing but cutthroat. It was only focused on profits, that you would throw your workers under the bus to squeeze out an extra 5 cent on the
Right.
share price. And there could be some amount of truth to that, right? But that wasn't the case everywhere. Now we're living in an era where there's a lot more pressure. And I think a lot of it is because of the democratization of people's voices through social media, where there's this expectation whereby, well, the place I work has to be, value driven. It has to be purpose driven. I have to
Mhm.
feel, loved and respected, and I have to be enveloped in a blanket of warmth by my boss. And that might be a bit too much to ask, out of where we work. Now, we all have worked at places that, like, I can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And then there's been places we've worked like, you know what, I could probably make $5 an hour more doing something else someplace different, but what is this worth to me, to
Yeah.
stay here? So um, maybe with that kind of generalized setup, when you hear the word culture as it relates to the workplace, what are some of the first thoughts that jump out at you?
For me, it really is more about the morale of the people and how you've what values you have instilled, whether it is all about profit, whether it is about relationships, whether it's about, I mean, I feel like there's kind of a hierarchy of those type of things. It could be, hey, we're about relationships, but those relationships need to still, we're here to make money,
Right.
but the relationship is very important. But it can't, again, if you're out and you're in sales and the culture is to, you've got to have the highest margins and um, whatever, then you, that can change
Yeah.
the culture there. So to me, it really is about the morale and the values that have been set by the company.
I love the way you set that up, because you mentioned morales and then quickly, or yeah, the morale, and then you quickly pinned that on values. And so turning that around, the values that are instilled from the top down will tend to create the morale, of the
Right,
organization.
right.
And we've all heard that, or maybe something along the lines of that. Values aren't really taught; they're caught. The way that we conduct ourselves as
Sure.
leaders has that's going to have more longer term currency if we're doing things that we wish to be emulated versus the old do as I say, not as I do,
Right,
right?
right.
And we can all think about times where you look at the nice, pretty mission and vision statement that they spent a lot of money to have printed and hung all over the place, but then you think, all right, that's not the way I feel
Sure.
when I walk around the factory floor, when I sit in the boardroom, when I'm in the break room. So, what do you think the role of a leader is in trying to shape the culture that is positive?
So this is where I think it is so strongly the leader is in charge of this, because you can, by example and by making people feel respected and comfortable and things like that, treating, whether it's giving managers like a directive and they're supported and they can go do it and it passes on down through that, whether how you're hiring, how you're promoting, how, there's a big thing, and I mean, you've been in um, government work and whatever, where they say if you want to get rid of somebody, you promote them out. you know, I mean,
Yeah,
what kind of voice is that
yeah, pass them
saying?
along to become somebody else's
But
problem, right?
but at least they're out of your department
Yeah,
and they've been promoted out because you couldn't get rid of them
yeah,
any other
yeah,
way. But that says a lot to, if you're putting up with employees who are not doing what's right, not following the rules, showing up late, doing things, that changes the morale of the others around you.
yeah,
If you have somebody who is nonstop drama,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this is where again you've got the selling sunset, and I sit there and I look, and because I knew for the last week this was going to be our topic. As I'm watching, I'm sitting here going, "All right, Jason and Brett have control of this. They can stop this drama. They aren't going to get paid for the show anymore,
Sure. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
but,
No,
but
you're
they have control over that in the sense that, they can go, this drama isn't going to happen in the
right.
workplace.
Yeah,
It's not going to be there,
sure.
and if somebody insists on keeping that so that the workplace, you're not going to be as productive, then you're removing them,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you mentioned earlier about hiring and promoting, and then even by extension, perhaps sometimes firing. I've heard it said before, and I believe it, that personnel is policy.
Mhm.
The type of people that we hire, the type of people we promote, the type of people that we reward, and maybe even the systems that incentivize people to be rewarded, that is policy.
Yeah.
Because if you talk about, okay, we want to foster an environment of inclusivity and collaboration whereby we all thrive together, but you've got this hard charging,
Yeah.
highly productive man or woman who is an island unto themselves, who makes enemies all throughout the building, but lands the big clients.
Right.
And you keep promoting that person, like, well, at the end of the day, they are a profit center. They are bringing home the bacon. I get it. Like, I get how the tactical inclination is, man, they're our top performer. But then you need to do one of two things. You need to either uh, try to coach them up to be more collaborative. Like, hey, why
Right.
don't you share what you're doing because it seems to work? Or you need to change what your vision of your office is because
Right.
it is not one of collaboration,
Sure.
right? It just isn't. And when there's that disconnect, it creates confusion. And when people in the workplace are confused because they see a difference between word and deed, now they're on unsettled ground. They don't know how to do their job in a way
Right.
that's going to be pleasing, to the person who's signing their check.
Well, again, and so now selling sunset is like really the topic.
Am I going to have to
I
like watch this
watch
as show
them.
prep? Like, I feel like I need to
Yeah,
do
maybe,
homework now. All right.
but to me, it's how an office shouldn't be run,
Yeah.
you know. But but I look at the fact that again, I also work in the real estate world, and we are an office full of women. We have 2 men
Okay.
and 14 women that work in our
Wow.
office.
Okay.
And I know that in general, people assume, oh, if there's women in a whole bunch of women, there's going to be drama. But, I know that the culture that has been set within our office is so protected. We don't have drama, and we are very
Yeah.
supportive and celebrate the wins of all of us. And because of that, I mean, we're brought in, a couple of us are brought in sometimes on these interviews just to make sure
Yeah.
that when we're thinking about hiring somebody, are they going to come in and be able to be that team player? And for us, it's gotten to a point that there may be some strong salespeople or this or that we could get, but if it would hurt the culture,
Yeah.
maybe the extra that they would bring would cause, you know, less production by
Yeah.
the others. Whereas if we got somebody who maybe did a little bit less, it might increase production
Uh,
of others.
so well said. And during the 1980 Miracle on Ice hockey run. I couldn't tell you anything about hockey. I don't know what
I couldn't
icing
either.
is. I don't know what offsides looks like, but that was a pretty seminal moment in Americana when the amateur American team beat hands down the best team on the planet, the
Right.
Soviet Union hockey team. And when they were getting these amateurs together and they were going through their trial and cuts to get down to that final roster, Herb Brooks, who was the coach, who was asked to come in and put together this team, he cut some of, inarguably the best players in the country. And when he was asked, why are you doing this? Don't you want the best players? He said, I don't need the best players. I need the right players.
Yeah.
And, that was a man who made some decisions that had it not worked out, people would forever say, well, you idiot, you didn't have 4 of the
Right.
All-Americans on your squad. What did you think was going to happen? But he was somebody that understood, look, 9 out of 10 times the Soviets are going to clean our clock. The
Right.
only chance we've got is to put a cohesive unit on the ice who doesn't care about how much puck time they're getting, who doesn't care how many goals they score. They just want to win. And he
Right.
figured out how to see that in the players that he was coming after. And when we're out there hiring, it's easy to fall in love with the golden resume, right? Like
Sure.
you get that resume, like, oh
Absolutely.
my gosh, this person, it's like they were built in a factory for this job.
Right.
And you go into the interview or sort of like predisposed, like I want to believe they're the best hire. But then in the course of that, if you sit back, you might begin to pick up some things like, I don't know that this person is really the best fit for the team.
Right. Right.
And as leaders, that can be a challenge sometimes,
It
but it's
is,
something we got to do right.
but it is so important. And so it really is the leadership's role to set that culture, because, you know, somebody underneath can work on it, but if it doesn't, if the leadership is not following through on it, you don't get any traction. And so, you know, I can have all the best plans, and if my bosses are like, nope, we're not going along that line, or I'm not being supported, or everything that I'm putting in line, they're allowing somebody else to do totally opposite,
Yeah.
then eventually
Right.
I'm like, why do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah. 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 And,
And
you know, whether, like I just used hockey, as an analogy, I think we can look, and I challenge you to find championship teams that had a really dysfunctional culture.
right,
Right now, they
right,
may have had talent. There's no doubt. It's not like, well, because we all get along, we're going to be cutting down nets at the end of the Final Four. But it is. I think it's rare. I can't even right now think of a team that was a champion that
well, I can
had
think
a
of one
poor
that
culture.
was.
Okay,
That,
please.
no, not that had poor culture, but one that
The
we
other way
all
around.
know,
Okay.
because, I'm not a big sports. College sports is about it, but not necessarily pro. But the Chicago Bulls
Yeah.
and that team, even though, arguably Michael Jordan
Hmm.
is the best player, or, now there's
Sure.
others that they're trying to, but either way, in that time frame, he was like the best player.
Hmm.
But he had a cohesive team
Yeah, I did.
with him. The coach, I mean, at one point they wanted to get rid of Phil Jackson, and
Yep.
the whole
Hmm.
team was like, "Well, then we're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
We aren't going.
We're
We're
not going to
not
play for
playing."
anybody else. Yeah.
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 So, I mean, the culture that was Phil Jackson that had been able to create that
That's
culture,
right.
and it worked, and it certainly led them to many
Yeah,
championships.
and that's a great. Oh my gosh, what a great point! Because the 1990s Bulls that won 6 titles, people will say, well, they had Michael Jordan. Well, the '85 Bulls had Michael Jordan. Michael
Right.
Jordan was there for 7 years, I think, before they won their first championship.
Right.
And it wasn't like he was a late bloomer. The dude was like in the mid to late '80s was MVP. He's winning slam dunk
Right.
competitions. He is hands down, the baddest cat on the court. But it wasn't until they got a different coach with a more cohesive, collaborative, team first type of mentality, and they got people to start buying in
Right.
that finally they cracked the code on that. And your earlier comment about, we can basically, you know, learn things from the wrong culture. I encourage anybody that's working someplace where they just can't stand it. Right. I'm definitely look for the next chapter of your life. Don't stay someplace you're miserable, but do not overlook the blessing that you're learning through these bad
Sure.
lessons right now.
Sure.
Like I will often think back to when I was a 16-year-old kid. I worked at McDonald's because they were great about working around my basketball and track schedule. 3 hours here, 3 hours there. But the manager, like the assistant fry manager or whatever I worked for, um, it was a culture of favoritism,
Right.
and me and my buddy were not favorites.
Right.
so
Right.
so was that a bad experience? Yeah. Did I push through it because I needed the 335 an hour? Yeah. Did I learn things that I could then incorporate into future leadership assignments? Oh, hell yeah, I did. I learned how toxic that can be when people,
Right.
and they'll pick up.
Oh,
They will be
yeah.
looking for it. Okay, whatever you do, you have got to put some guardrails around anything that even smells like it could be, favoritism, right?
Right.
So we can always learn. Whatever culture we're in, we're going to learn something from it.
Well, I've always had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and I've owned businesses or been part owner in various ventures over the course of my years. And but when I worked for somebody, I always felt like there was an advantage in a sense to them because I already understood what they go through as an owner, and I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
I owe it to them. I'm now their employee, I
yeah,
mean, to do it just like I would if I were the owner, because I knew I needed my employees to give their everything.
sure.
When everybody's really giving their all, you can be profitable. You can make, when you have people who you're like, okay, no more smoke breaks. You've taken 3 this hour. I can't get it. There's nothing
Yeah,
cohesive going
your
on.
non-smokers pick up the habit just to
Right.
get more breaks.
Right.
Okay.
But the things that I learned from people who were not doing things um, in necessarily the right way, and you were seeing some of the toxicity in some of these things, as much as I'm trying, but you're seeing that the leadership that you're working for isn't. I would learn and go, okay, mental note, my next venture, I want to make sure that that's not something I ever do or allow into there. And so, you try to work through that
Yeah,
until you're moving on. But as you're seeing it, that's always a mental note that I do.
yeah.
Learning.
So, in your capacity as a leader at these various companies that you started or where you've worked, to the extent you would want to share, can you think of anything you ever did that maybe had a negative impact on the culture that you finally kind of you caught yourself like, I might be a little bit part of the problem here. I need to fix this.
I did. I can remember working for a dentist office, and the culture there was not very good in the first place. And there had become drama and different things. And it seemed like somebody was upset with somebody else all the time.
Yeah,
And you can allow yourself to get drawn in to those things and pick sides and whatever instead of staying neutral. And several of the problems were with the actual dentists that we worked for,
yeah,
and it just, was just this constant thing. And rather than necessarily going to them, where now I'm jumping on the bandwagon of, oh, they're just awful. And we're all talking and we're all doing,
yeah,
rather than
yeah,
going and talking to them, um, you know, my relationship there really didn't end well. Although later I did sit down many years later and actually apologize because I'm like, well, even though this wasn't good and it needed to be fixed, I didn't contribute to the solution.
yeah, yeah.
And
No,
so,
that's good.
it took me a while to understand
Yeah.
that, but it
Well,
was.
okay, well, I'll now I'm obligated to out
That's
myself,
right.
but I will also say to pick up on the drama theme. Um, as a squadron commander of a tactical flying squadron, that's populated with aviators, we also had support personnel,
Right.
and there was this woman technically proficient in her craft. I mean, she knew what she was doing, but I mean, oh, it was like oxygen to her. And
Yeah.
the first interaction I had as she came in, she said something along the lines of, "Now, believe me, nobody hates drama more than me, but
It's always those
oh my
that
gosh, yeah, yeah, yeah." Well, you learn quickly that whenever somebody begins their monologue with, "So nobody hates drama more than
Right.
me," like, okay, I bet that's not true. Um, but one thing that I realized that I had a problem with as a leader was, and I've shared with you, and I think even on the show before, that I do not believe in good emotions and bad emotions. We often think, well, happy is good, but angry is bad. Well, if the anger is what helps that mother protect her child
If it's
from the
justified,
intruder in the living
sure.
room at 2 in the morning, I'd say that's righteous anger.
Right.
Good for you that you
Mhm.
channeled it and used it appropriately. So what I think we all realize is that it's how we manifest the emotion
Sure.
is how we're judged. I could be angry inside, but if I'm not visibly manifesting in such a way, I can't be held accountable
Sure.
for how I felt. Now, if I act on it, it's a little bit different. So a problem that I had would be if somebody made a mistake and I brought them in for counseling, that was going to be geared towards remediation. Like, hey, look, we're all human. What can we learn from this so
Right.
that you don't do it again, or that we can maybe derive some lessons and we don't do it again? Because tomorrow it could be me that makes the innocent mistake and we should learn from that. But when somebody was, let's say, willfully disobedient,
Yeah.
like what you did was deliberate, there's no way that you didn't understand that was wrong. When I bring that person in to talk about that, I never obligated myself to make sure that they were completely at ease
Oh, no.
and comfortable. No, I wanted it to be such an unpleasant experience that aside from what I was saying, the manner by which I was saying it and the way it made them feel was such that they think upon conclusion, well, I never
I
want to
wanna
do
do
that
that again.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, so far so good, right?
Right?
Here's the problem. I walk out of the office and I have not turned that switch off. And for the next hour, I'm walking
Right.
around, and even though I've got a stoic expression, I'm not yelling, I'm not cussing, I'm not beating my chest, like a baboon, right? But it's obvious, the boss is not happy.
Sure.
That is so unfair to those other people in that building.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is so unfair to them. And then to take it one step further, you don't know who grew up in a household with an angry mom or an angry dad, and
Sure.
you don't know what you are. I dare use the word
Trigger.
triggering, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody in any organization has their hand on the rheostat that sets the temperature and tone of the room like the leader.
Absolutely.
And I will freely admit that it took me a while to really figure that out. And once I did, okay, step one, awareness, okay,
Mhm.
like okay, I have a problem.
Right.
Now what can I do to kind of fix that?
Well, that goes back, and I think I've mentioned this before, but the dentists that we worked for that were so, we never knew when they walked in the morning, you were waiting to see what was the mood of the day.
Yeah.
And
Bad.
he could walk in a bad mood, and the whole day and the whole office was just like, "Ugh, can't
Yeah.
wait to get out of here."
Yeah.
And so as leaders, we do have to learn to, whatever has happened, whether it's at home or whether, either we come and explain and say, listen, things are bad today, just don't hit me with anything major.
Sure.
I'm not in the best mood.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it is hard to just compartmentalize and shut that out.
Yeah.
But at least let some people know that, hey, today's really not a good day. I'm dealing with stuff, whether it's personal or in business, but just be prepared. Y'all just
Absolutely.
give me a buffer. But also, there's a saying out there, like the worst, and I can't remember the exact saying, but it's basically, keeping a bad employee is the worst thing you can do for the culture in your, that will lose production from your good employees by allowing somebody who is constantly
Oh
causing
yeah.
problems,
Oh yeah.
not doing sales, and us giving that up. So it's so important to recognize and foster the good. I would rather, one of my kids very much wanted recognition. And so when I would say something, I'm so proud of you for doing this to one of the other kids,
Yeah.
she wanted to jump in and she
Sure.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to do that too.
Yeah. Where's my gold star?
Yes. So when we really recognize our good talent and promote that kind of behavior or that kind of thing, whether it's their attitude, whether it's being a team player, those kind of things, it increases those behaviors in others.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I mean, you get more of what you reward.
right.
And typically you get less of what you punish. And maybe the last quick little story I'll share. it was one of the deployments, one of the first deployments to Iraq to kick off the war. So we were living in Saudi Arabia, getting ready to, and then eventually flying, the opening combat missions in and out of Iraq. And we were living in pretty Spartan conditions,
Yeah.
around the desert,
Yeah.
in canvas tents, sleeping on cots. We had plenty of water to drink. There was porta potties, for the business. There was even eventually like a shower tent, but because of water rationing in the beginning, like, okay, take a shower every 3 or 4 days, whatever,
Right.
knock the dust off. And we're eating meals ready to eat. So
Sure.
a plastic bag of food, probably from the 80s.
Yeah.
but we had all of our basic survival needs, right?
Sure.
And oh, by the way, we're all in it together. It wasn't like there was one group of people living like that, and then right next door was the Ritz-Carlton.
Right.
Right. So we're all in it together. And so there was a guy, I started calling him the weatherman, because he would come into the tent. Oh, it's so hot out there. I'm so dusty. I'm so tired. I hate this food. Like, it was the same weather report every day.
Right.
And eventually I just asked him a rhetorical question. I said, look, dude, I don't know why you feel so compelled to remind us who are living here of our living conditions. We understand it.
Right.
All right. If you don't die here in 5, 10, 20 years, which, oh, by the way, it's now been 20 years, people are going to remember how you acted during this period, right? And once we are done and we go home, you can't go back and undo the reputational damage by becoming the biggest complainer in a camp of 5,000 people living in the exact same conditions. So one thing that we found in that culture was through fear, sarcasm, and ridicule, we are going to punish the types of behaviors that are not conducive, because maybe somebody is like engrossed in a book, they're sitting on their cot, they're in the tent, but just for maybe 1 minute, they are mentally somewhere else. They're at peace,
Right.
They're content, and then you walk in and you start whining and complaining.
That's the saying, the one bad apple spoils the whole bunch.
Yeah.
And that is another area that you do have to be protective of, because if you have somebody walking through the office and complains and tries to start, whether it's drama or just complain, have you seen how so-and-so does this? Oh, it just gets on. It's ridiculous. It's just, and then they walk over and they just complain about everybody and everything. And they're upset with management. They should be doing this and they don't do this for me. They don't do this. That begins to spread.
Yeah.
And you have to be protective of those kind of things. So if you have somebody who is not happy in your camp, you need to sit down, figure out, can they become happy, but that you're not going to be able to allow it to continue, because it does change the mood and the morale, the culture. So
absolutely.
I know that we are pretty much out of time, but I just think, culture is such an important thing, and the leadership has to, you've got to promote the things that you want, and you've got to really try to get the things that you don't want in that office.
Yeah.
And either remove it completely or, keep it so that it's so minimal.
Yeah. And I would just encourage any leader who's listening just to be aware that culture is not something you overlay on top of the operation. The culture permeates everything about your business. And if you don't do it on purpose, it'll just simply happen on its own. And when it happens on its own, it may not be the version that you like. So as a leader, just kind of think, okay, what is it? Like, what are the strengths and weaknesses of our culture, whatever that may be for your organization? And then what can I do to incentivize the aspects of the culture that will make people not only happier, but more productive? And what are some things, complaining, gossiping, whatever that may be, that you need to start addressing? If you don't like the word punish, address so as to minimize. We'll never get rid of all that stuff. We're human. All of us are going to come to work with our flaws. But as a leader, be deliberate about establishing the culture that you want and not simply reacting to the culture that you get.
Absolutely. So we appreciate you joining us. We know that your time is valuable. We would appreciate if you find value in what we have shared. We would love for you to share. This is still going to be available on LinkedIn, Facebook, and uh, YouTube,
Mhm.
but it also goes out to Spotify, Audible, and Apple.
Apple.
I'm an Apple user, right?
That itty bitty
But that
company in
little
Silicon
company,
Valley.
right? So we would love for you to share or even go follow, subscribe to us because that definitely helps us. And until next week, we appreciate you again, and we look forward to having you join us again Tuesday.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.